Welcome to the Augusto Health IT podcast, where we talk to industry leaders about their vision for software design and development, mobile and cloud in healthcare. I'm your host, Brian Anderson, CEO of Augusto Health IT. There's a lot to cover here, so let's get started. Welcome to the Augusto Digital Insights podcast. This episode is part of our focus on entrepreneurship. This episode's guest is Andrew Heuerman. He is an entrepreneur with roots in our hometown of Grand Rapids, Michigan. He has an extensive background in healthcare and medical device innovation. He at one point worked for Spectrum Health, our region's largest health system, where he focused on product development and commercialization of innovations coming from the Spectrum staff. He's currently the CEO of The Patient Company and has recently been in the news for raising $1 million in seed round funding. I've been looking forward to this interview. Welcome, Andrew.
Thanks, Brian. Yeah, thanks for having me. Really excited to be here and excited to get into it.
Hey, Andrew, why don't you just kind of share a little bit about your background? I think it's a pretty cool path.
Yeah, for sure. So I think, kind of starting from the very beginning, of course, I was fortunate to grow up with two parents who were both in healthcare. Dad's a dentist. My mom's been a yoga teacher, kind of like a naturopath type career her whole life as well. And, growing up, I really felt like I was, I'd say, extremely interested in health sciences. And then, I think really my journey led me to realize or believe that I'm also very interested in small business startups, personal businesses as well. And, just the exposure that I had to both growing up, I think led to a lot of the kind of decisions I've made and the path that I've been on. So just want to kind of set the stage with that. But I originally grew up just north of Detroit in Clarkston, Michigan, and went to Grand Valley State University to play tennis and for my undergraduate degree. I was about 2.5, maybe 3.5 years in as a pre-med student and kind of had this realization that I didn't necessarily want to be a practicing physician or necessarily a clinician at all, but still had this passion for healthcare, health tech, health sciences, and then, really started to kind of get interested in the business side of health sciences as well. Found myself actually kind of switching majors. I basically took a semester off, just kind of wandered into some business classes, some product development classes, and just tried to kind of find my way. And found myself actually in a class that led to an internship with Spectrum Health, working on mostly Spectrum Health staff ideas, developing technology, improving healthcare through technology development, and just fell in love with it. I joked around with the Spectrum staff while I was there that as soon as I kind of found that niche within Grand Valley's classes, I just hung around until they couldn't kick me out, until I was providing value back to the system as well. So, that's kind of my path to where I got started. And then, happy to dig into kind of how things went from there.
You started really as an entrepreneur in a sense, right? Like It's funny that your experiences, dropping into different classes. That's Steve Jobs tells that story in his classic commencement speech at Stanford, right? And, I think that's pretty cool. But when you started at Spectrum, you were an entrepreneur in a sense, right? You started out as an intern, and then you became what was it like being an entrepreneur inside of Spectrum, and how does that work inside of a big organization like that?
Yeah, absolutely. It was really unbelievable how much I could learn from the people around me at Spectrum. I mean, you have world-class physicians, and then you've got, business, regional and national business leaders. I think, shout out to Tina Friesdecker, the CEO of Spectrum Health. She was just recently put on the board for American Hospital Association, just as an example. So, surrounding yourself with people like that and just learning and getting yourself in a position to learn from people like that is really, what led me to these future opportunities and led to the success that we had at Spectrum Health as well. But it was really interesting because we were getting these ideas from, everyone at Spectrum Health. It doesn't matter your position. That was the purpose of the department, was to take your ideas in and see if there was, validity and if there was a feasible path to market and there's a need in the market. And so we really did a ton of that work and just, learning from, everyone between, floor level staff and these world-class physicians about the problems that they're facing and the lack of technology to address those problems. It actually made, my entrepreneurship journey really, I'd say, quite easy to kind of get into because, half of the battle with that job at Spectrum Health is really reviewing these ideas and determining what's worth moving forward on, right? So, doing that for several years and talking with these clinicians and these people who know so much more than I do and telling them, hey, this is a great idea, but unfortunately we can't move this forward for X, Y, and Z, I think really just created this foundation for understanding how to identify solvable problems and business opportunities within those problems, and then developing the technology and the solutions to address them is just a long haul. I think a lot of people expect, hey, we have this idea, 6 weeks we'll get a prototype that turns into this thing that's in the market. It's not that fast, especially in healthcare. I think that's been something really interesting as well. So yeah, long story short, I was just able to put my hands on so many different projects and learn from the people that were leading each project until I felt comfortable internally to start leading some of those projects on my own. And that was kind of the natural path. And once I started kind of leading those projects, finding success within some of those individually, I felt, yeah, hey, you know what? Here's a really good project, and let me pull this one out and see how I can do on my own with it now that I've had this success internally and learned from all of these people internally and really prepared myself for that next leg of the journey.
That's cool, man. And I totally agree with you on the idea of surrounding yourself with people that can uplift you and educate you, and then you had the desire to actually want to be successful, right? And to really soak up all that wisdom. It's an accelerated path to success in my experience. I also think it's cool. Like you mentioned, there was this kind of all these ideas and you had to kind of sift through them and then you had to, work with different people and communicate things that could move forward and couldn't move forward. And then when you found something that you could move forward, what were some of the things that you identified that made them movable, and how did you then start to figure out how to fund them?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, two things before I get too far into that, I think is first, at the height of kind of ideas coming into Spectrum Health, we were receiving over 2,000 ideas a year from internal staff. So the review process wasn't just in depth for the individual projects, but it was also, very large in width as well. So, I don't want to pretend like I was, personally reviewing each and every single 2,000, projects, and I was alone responsible for the success of these.
Yeah.
That'd be crazy to claim, and that's not how it was at all. We had teams of, passionate clinicians and engineers and, technology leading experts. And, it started really of me trying to just facilitate and manage conversation and take notes of, what are these experts saying? Where are they getting their information from? Who's really the experts in what space, and really kind of taking it from that perspective. And I think, what's interesting is our review process actually turned into a formal document. We called it a project brief. And this project brief was 12 to 15 pages long as a template, before you start populating it with all of the information. And it took everything from, who was the individual who brought this project forward? What's their background? Kind of, what's their expertise and how did they get this information? And then all the way through to, what would be the cost of development? What would be the cost to actually drive a product like this into the marketplace? And I think it's especially in healthcare, it's crucial to take all of that into consideration because, just regarding medical device classification alone, if you are building a medical device, right, which is just a subsection of things that could be done.
Yep.
There's a huge difference between a class 0 medical device and a class 3 medical device. And one of those huge distinctions is that a class 3 medical device typically has a much longer pathway to market, right? So, that in itself is something to consider. But I think, you start to kind of layer these criteria on top of each other, and then you just start to gather this data. And then I think the other thing is not just objective data and research as well, but what we had access to at Spectrum Health and what was really the driver, I would say, of most of these projects, especially in the early stages, is moving forward just to an idea that was presentable. Mm-hmm. And getting as many folks in the room who haven't heard about it, right? Mm-hmm. At Spectrum Health, there's 30,000 employees, and you were able to just go walk in the door, get a room full of clinicians, and say, "Hey, one of your colleagues had this great idea. We think there's some promise behind
Mm-hmm.
it. What do you think? Put your hands on it. Give us some more information." And really, that's how those projects would move forward so quickly. It wasn't just one individual looking through this criteria. Rather, it was, we have these set criteria, and
Yep.
12 to 15 pages worth. So I won't bore you with all those details, but, and then really just, validating it across as many people internally as we can. And then what was really interesting was the high level projects, the ones that were really moving forward, or there was a lot of promise to, crossed off a lot of those 12 to 15 pages of criteria. Then you can start to kind of socialize those projects externally, right? So you had asked a little bit about funding those projects.
Mm-hmm.
Spectrum Health did have an internal budget, and it was great for kind of exploring that type of stuff as well. But to move any healthcare product forward, it costs a lot of capital and a lot of time and resources, and to really justify that expense, you've got to go out and get that external validation. Mm-hmm. So what we were really using, what I would recommend for really anyone in this kind of state is, grants is really a huge thing. I could go into extreme detail on, but there's a lot of state funded grants, regional grants, national grants. That's a great form of validation in itself. Those are people that are looking at other proposals for technology development in your same space, day after day, quarter after quarter, and approving those for funds based on the progress that those projects are making. So mm-hmm. grants were an incredible tool, still are for our company today. Just using that to really define everything that you're working on, submit it in a formal process is invaluable to a company or to a project in itself. But of course, when the success comes with funding, it almost becomes a no-brainer process, especially in a highly regulated space. So we used grants a lot. And then I think, moving forward from that is kind of a similar pathway. And I can talk about kind of the differences internally and externally, but, investors use a really similar lens, right? Of, what progress have you made? What data have you collected, and why do you believe this is the path forward? Why is there merit behind this project? Who's involved? All those types of lenses. And, the more investors you talk to, the more questions you get. So our process was kind of, move forward to grants, get as many, eyes on it through that grant lens as possible, really refine our approach, and then move it forward to investors if we've been successful with grants, and do the same thing, get as many eyes on it as we can, see what they're thinking, where the gaps are as a project or as a company, and just begin to fill in those gaps and, wash, rinse, repeat, and keep going through those same types of processes.
Yeah, those are great insights, man. And the grant process, it's not for every kind of business, right? But in this space,
sure,
there's a lot of grants being written for things in healthcare, and opportunities to take advantage of those. It's interesting though that you get a little, all the momentum building that you'd have to do inside, right? And then validation, those early validation. Does this thing have legs? Do other people want it? Mm-hmm. And there's all these gates of validation, and that's really the path of a venture funded startup. Really, you've got to do that whether you're inside a company or not. Yeah,
absolutely. So, I think just to touch on it one last bit on the grants, I think writing grants is something that hopefully not many people are really excited about it. Yeah. In general. It's a really burdensome process. It's a lot of work. It's not much fun, right? But I think it's something interesting that has led to my success so far is just how grant writing really fit in with my actual skill set. It's not something I ever would have identified, but I've had a lot of success with it. And I would really highly recommend, even if you think that sounds like the worst thing in the world, find an applicable grant, get some thought to paper. I think it'll benefit your business, your project, your venture, regardless. So just want to kind of, give everyone a quick push to give it a try at least and see what you can get done with it. But
where do you start with grants? How do you find them?
Yeah, so I think grants.gov is the easier response. Of course, for federally funded grants, there are a list of them available at grants.gov. But I think it's really become, especially in healthcare entrepreneurship, it's become kind of the standard of to go after these grants. So if you're in healthcare and you're working on a project, I definitely recommend reaching out to others. I think what's interesting, what was exciting at Spectrum Health is Spectrum Health as a nonprofit had access to state-funded, federally funded grants as a nonprofit status. So that provided them kind of that extra opportunity to go after more and more grants. But of course, there's grants for for-profits and small businesses as well. And then some things I'm starting to learn a little bit more, which is kind of similar. There's actually even direct submissions for funding to federally funded institutes as well, which isn't technically a grant, but you can basically put together information in kind of I'd say like light intellectual property submission and see, is there an interest in co-developing as well? So I think I don't have a great answer of like where to start, where to look. I'd say connect with your network and see what they say individually. It kind of depends on a project basis, but I mean, geez, there's so many opportunities out there. And again, it's not just about the funding. The funding is great, but it's way more about the validation and kind of the refinement to your project, your venture, your business. Yeah.
Yeah. When I was younger, I used to think that those were easy processes. I've learned over time that the refinement of these ideas into succinct ideas is not easy, but necessary, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think, that not easy but necessary process, of evaluating, like I said, by no means was I the individual reviewing 2,000 ideas a year, but as a team, we were. And I think to go through that many ideas in a year and to really understand, quickly what's worth pursuing, what's not, and then to start getting beat up kind of in that later stage of these grant submissions and really get that work under us as well. I think that's really what led me to feeling, ready for stepping outside of my role with Spectrum Health and taking on this larger, kind of personal role with the patient company and just the success we were having at Spectrum Health as well. Over just a couple of years, they were able to take 14 products to market, raise a couple $1 million for those efforts. I really felt like, I had kind of gone through the full gambit of, napkin sketch idea or just a problem statement all the way to something tangible in the marketplace people are buying and, helping to drive results there as well. So I think that's kind of the background that led me to believe we were ready to go. And then of course, I think, the other thing I kind of established was this is something I'm not looking to do, without the support of the network that I've had this entire time. So, getting a deal done with Spectrum Health to help get started, I think was crucial for my entrepreneurship journey, as well as I had so much respect and had learned so much from the system and wouldn't be anywhere without, that opportunity at Spectrum Health. I couldn't imagine, going out and being this entrepreneur without, some sort of connection back to, back to the mothership. Right. But, yeah, so that was kind of what started it was, we were able to get a deal done with Spectrum Health of, basically an investment to get started and to really get out and continue pursuing this one specific project, which I can go into detail on, but essentially it's called Simple. It moves patients from one flat surface to another. Process is called lateral patient transfer. Currently, that's done with 4 to 8 clinicians. Takes a ton of time, but unfortunately, no one has that time. So it's resulting in about 12,000 clinician injuries annually. So we've developed a product, internally and now externally to address that problem specifically. So it's essentially automated lateral patient transfer in a way that no other device has done before. So we're really excited about it, driving that product to market still, wrapping up development, FDA specific stuff as well, hopefully on the market, Q1, Q2 of 2022. But, that's the project that we took out. So for me, like I said, I started pre-med, but after my kind of leave of absence or, kind of self-exploration journey within university, I did graduate with a degree in kinesiology. So was always really interested just innately in, the orthopedic projects, the rehab projects, anything that addressed musculoskeletal injuries or disorders, that was something that I was all over. So, lateral patient transfer is exactly that. It was right in my wheelhouse, was in love with this project, as soon as we really found out that there was, some momentum behind it. And that momentum, actually, I gotta give a shout out as well. We used a lot of student resources at Grand Valley State University, and so it was really cool to turn around and work with my alma mater just a couple of years out of school and work with these engineers who came up with these initial concepts. The initial concept for this device was actually just 2 steel poles and a hand drill. And we had some engineers basically showing proof of concept of moving patients from one surface to another with just that kind of rudimentary setup. And the process they took of within product development to go from that to pretty close to what our final prototype looked like was just incredible and rewarding, and very cool to work with those students. So really excited. We actually just made enough progress to seed back 3 student projects this fall semester. So now not only have I been able to be a Sherpa to those students from Spectrum Health, but now I get to do it personally and get back to, that same environment with those students. So really excited to be doing that as well.
Yeah, that's cool. It's interesting because this idea was really started inside of Spectrum. That's when you identified the need. How did you convince Spectrum to let you take it outside of Spectrum and you be the entrepreneur to develop it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to start with just, again, this was not my idea. This was, a patient transport manager came forward and said that he was having issues with his staff getting hurt. He was really concerned about his staff, and he wanted to find a better way to address lateral patient transfers specifically, as he was seeing that as kind of like the high frequency, high risk area. So again, kind of the process I described before, we really beat that idea up, took it through our formal brief process, got in front of all the patient transport staff, nurse managers, nurse staff that we could find, saw what they thought, what they liked, what they didn't, continued to develop that, went through 3 separate grant processes, with that device, got it funded and developed further each time. And really we're at a point where we had been now working with a contract developer with this grant funded money. I was leading the project at that time, and there was just so much promise, but something that's really tricky, and what we look to kind of serve as a guide for long term, is developing technology as a healthcare system gets to be a little bit, I'd say within this gray area, this legally concerning area, because as a healthcare system, eventually you can't sell medical devices back into your own healthcare system, right? There's a huge conflict of interest there. The regulatory burden and kind of the legalities there are just not worth, the juice isn't worth the squeeze to pursue something like that. So there becomes kind of this gray area and this red line of, we've got to get this out at this certain point, in this gray area of, geez, we could probably get this out now. So that's kind of the development of intellectual property that leads to licensing or commercialization. So that was another kind of part of our job, was we were licensing this intellectual property once it was far enough developed. And the more complex the project, the further along it has to be to license typically. So like I was mentioning earlier, like a class 3 medical device is really tricky to license in an early state, because it's still, somewhat ambiguous, and you could have this device that's got a lot of promise, but couldn't be tested, at a healthcare system. So that was kind of where we were at with the patient transfer device. And, really what it was, we had so much promise. We took it to a national conference, actually, with nurses, called the Magnet Conference, which is an accreditation that hospitals look to receive on nursing excellent quality of care. And at this conference, the validation that we got from hundreds of nurses, that hadn't seen it, maybe even thousands of nurses that hadn't seen it, as well as you could see some of the vendors with, I'd say tangentially or competitive products were creeping around to peek at our booth. We started to really get an idea that this project was far enough along to spin out. But on the licensing side, talking to these technology leaders, these big incumbents in the space, like the Hillroms and the Strykers and the Medlines, Medtronics, those big groups, the project just wasn't far enough along for them to take on. It didn't make any sense. And a lot of those companies have some hard and fast rules of, you've got to have sales before we even start a conversation. So, I think it's really interesting to kind of be in that position, because as a healthcare system, Spectrum Health was faced with this choice of, well, we can stop developing this technology that's extremely promising, or we can, find an individual entrepreneur to come in and learn how to, to take this project on and take it from there. Or, maybe someone internally can throw their name, their name in the hat to actually take it further. And so that was kind of what I had done. I saw a couple other people do this prior, and there was always this general sentiment of, if it gets far enough along, the person who brought the idea forward is kind of the first call of, are you prepared, qualified, ready to move this forward? And I think at that time it was just, there wasn't a clear path for anyone but me to take this project forward outside of Spectrum Health. I had the background of working on it for so long, submitting these grants and doing the research, and I had a great relationship with the contract developer, which is still our developer and will be our manufacturer today out of Kalamazoo, Keystone Solutions Group. And I felt like it was just really the time to move that forward. So I put together this PowerPoint presentation, and kind of was outlining all of this. And I went in to sit in a room and present this PowerPoint, and it was the executive team at Spectrum Health. So I'm sweating before we start talking. These people are much smarter than me. They're paid more to do more important things, and I'm just trying to bring forward this project that, of course, high risk at this stage, but really felt like there was a clear need and a clear path to move it forward. And I think what was amazing of Spectrum Health, and what I think I kind of hold in my mind today, is I think the meeting lasted 10 to 15 minutes of everyone listened really patiently. They understood. They heard what I was saying, and they were just like, "This is amazing. This is the type of work we want to support. we hope that this turns into a device that, helps our clinicians very soon.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, it's not an overnight thing, right? And even the success you've had so far, you've emerged from Spectrum, you've been working to get it approved through the FDA, and I understand that's not a trivial process. And then also you have pre-orders. Like maybe talk about like what it's been like to build momentum.
Yeah, absolutely. So pre-order specifically, I got to be really careful with the language here, because of the legalities, and it's not FDA approved, so technically you can't purchase the device. But the pre-orders have come from business partners, strategic partners who have, they've taken a look at the device. Spectrum Health is one of them, and I'm really happy to say that we've got a couple others, and I'll leave those off the table for now. But really they're looking at this as not just a product that they want to purchase, but a company that they want to invest in, which I think is the biggest milestone, the biggest, I'd say, kind of, validation that we could get so far on the product line is, we want to invest in your company. And through those investments, we can basically structure, deals to get those companies, and those healthcare systems, product,
Yeah.
both for research as well as initial product, due to that kind of relationship. So, that has been extremely rewarding. We were looking actually to kick off research first week in November, so it was just about a month out. But this chip shortage, which has really kind of held us back. So we're now looking to start research early January with those partners who are committed to invest and support our company. And we really hope that we get that successful research and it turns into a product that they're ready to use. Just a quick couple weeks or a couple months right after that.
Yeah, man, it's cool to see an entrepreneur at work, man. And you've also got you mentioned chip shortage, and this is like more of a hardware device, but you also have worked in the software technology space as well, right? So it's like, what do you see out there? What's getting you excited? There's a lot of money flowing through healthcare innovation right now.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's funny. So I had worked on software projects and I love software projects as well. But I think, like I was saying, just because of my background in specifically, kinesiology, musculoskeletal type projects, I did find myself a little bit more on the hardware side. So, our first hire at the patient company was Ryan Peters. He's my co-founder, the COO, and he actually has an extensive background in software development, software regulation, so many different things that really add that extra filter to our company. And it wasn't a mistake at all. A lot of people kind of, were questioning like, that's interesting. Bringing in this software expert. Of course, he's got product development, sales background as well. But I think it's been crucial to keep an innovative lens for our company and to do exactly what you're describing, which is keep a finger on the pulse of the industry. So yeah, I've got to give Ryan a big kind of commendment here. Of he's always constantly sending me research articles and publications on new investments, software development, technology in this healthcare innovation space, on the side that I would say that I care about, but I'm just, innately a little bit less geared towards. So yeah, I'd love to just kind of give Ryan here a plug. And if you ever want to talk about software development specifically within healthcare, I think he's a great person to talk to. He's been a tremendous resource. But yeah, as you mentioned, venture funding is off the charts in these spaces, and rightfully so. I think what happened when COVID came down was people kind of finally got pushed into a couple different trends that were happening, that I think were kind of just expedited, and in healthcare specifically as well. So Zoom is a great example, of course, but probably a better example in healthcare specifically that a lot of people don't, or maybe didn't have a good idea of, and probably do now, is teledoc or these virtual patient visits, and it's incredible actually. So we are participants in the Mayo Clinic Arizona State University MedTech Accelerator for 2021. And one of the companies in this accelerator program has just recently partnered with Verizon to basically provide a phone package to international, across international borders that includes telehealth services, right? So that type of a partnership, that type of a company, the scale that they've been accelerated at,
Yeah, and
crazy.
it's not COVID was it was happening.
Yeah.
It's just like the research on these vaccines and the mRNA technology, all this stuff has been happening for years, right? And and that was the trigger point that made it become mainstream. And it's like I think most people after they've experienced, they were kind of, a lot of people were against it. How is it going to work? I don't like that technology or whatever. When you're forced to use it, you're like, oh, well, I can integrate this into my real life. And there's a time and a place. And sometimes it's actually way better, way more convenient. And I can see how I can blend these things together. And so it's not going to go away. It's going to continue to grow, I think, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So there's all sorts of examples, but two other really good ones I think is Q Health actually just went public under the ticker HLTH. They are providing this at-home testing kit, which is incredible. I mean, it looks just like an Apple product, the packaging all the way to the product itself, and it's this amazing self-testing kit. And of course, the first one was for COVID, so you do the swab, both sides of your nose by yourself. You plug it into this box. And then the box gives you a reading, within 20 minutes of whether you're COVID, positive or negative. And that company was able to develop relationships with huge supporters, huge backers right away. So a hilarious example, I think culturally that also was relevant in healthcare, which I think is, first of all, that is a pretty new thing because of COVID as well. But Kanye West was, creating his new album within the Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta, Georgia. And I think he was living there for like 3 weeks or something crazy. But the only way he was able to live there and be there with all of his staff and bring people in for recording and for those concerts that he did was he was using that Q Health technology.
Yeah.
And he was able to get people tested within 20 minutes on this personal device. And now that company, their scale is going to be increased dramatically as well, because they're looking to expand to flu testing, into all of these different at-home tests that can be done very easily and also can be done at a business level. So these business owners, big families, corporate meetings, you can use this technology to accelerate, kind of your speed for compliance, as well as, maintaining general health. So just another great example of like blending hardware and software to create these new technologies, and just a good representation of where the industry is at.
You just hit on a previous podcast with Dr. Kyle, who's the medical director of Oscar Health. And he's an investor, and he was highlighting in our podcast, like there's actually like these types of machines that can now produce, pharmacy grade drugs, in the field. And, you just type in the recipe and out comes the medication. Right. And just the ability to do all that remotely, the ability to like have that delivery of that in a totally different form than going to a doctor's office or going to a pharmacy, right? Like it's just the beginnings of revolutionizing healthcare too. And then you look at the work that's being done in interoperability and the ability to share all of this data and the ability for people to have access to this data and program against it through APIs. I mean, it's continuing to, like, healthcare is continuing to unlock its opportunities for innovation.
I completely agree. I think that's very well said. And I think, this is a perfect opportunity to also kind of, just really quickly touch on, there are still a lot of dark spots in healthcare as well. And I think what's interesting about healthcare is, when there's a huge systemic problem, it becomes a, social problem as well really quickly, as of course it's impacting everybody. It's really unique to healthcare as an industry, as opposed to like the automotive industry, where like if there's some sort of large problem, you just don't really hear about it until the next generation or next year's models come out and it's been solved, right? Like it's not impacting your health day to day. So I think, it's been really interesting, obviously very sad and disheartening to see, mental health kind of data and, suicide rates during COVID, as well as, I think, one that's huge and near to me is just obesity rates, diabetics, unfortunately still just climbing through the roof. So, while there are a lot of problems being solved, I would say specifically in the acute care market, pushing things remote, allowing patients to have better access and care, related to their data, this telehealth monitoring, all of this stuff, amazing. But, related to mental health and, I'd say physical health, specifically to, obesity rates and just making sure that everyone's staying healthy and physically active, that's a huge problem as well. And so I think I almost look at those problems, I look at all these problems with two lenses, and I don't know if I've been trained to do this or what, but the first lens is, oh my God, here's this huge problem that's keeping me up at night. Why are people getting, physically unhealthy, worse and worse, despite our advancements in, artificial intelligence and robotics to, treat all these disease states, right? How can we make such advancements there, but on these, these kind of more social or personally, impacted problems for everybody, we're still having these bad rates. So that's the first side. But the second side is, how exciting, what an opportunity for millions of people to become entrepreneurs and learn how to deal with those problems, whether it's locally, whether it's just with your family and your friends, but all the way up to national scale to improve these issues as well. So definitely just want to kind of put in a plug, or make sure everyone's still aware of those issues, checking in on your people, make sure your mental health of your group is good, and be that person, be that advocate for your family and your team.
And there's so many more services coming online too that take advantage of this telehealth medicine concept, because
Exactly.
It's so much more accessible than it's ever been before.
Absolutely.
And hey, I really appreciate this interview, and we got to do another one in the future.
Yeah, sure, man. Yeah, I'd love to.
I think it's really great what you're doing. I love your story. We're excited to help where we can, and I wish you the very best. How do people get in touch with you if they want to learn more about what you're doing?
So we do have a website. It's just thepatientcompany.com. So check it out. We do have a page specifically for Simple, or lateral patient transfer device, as well. So, if you're a clinician, you're interested in reviewing the technology, checking it out in your environment, please reach out to us directly through there. Also, I can attach my email address. It is just andrew@thepatientcompany.com. And if you really are looking for more information, we also have Ryan@thepatientcompany.com. I mentioned he's kind of on the software side as well. But yeah, I mean, this has been a really fun interview. Would love to do another one. And Brian, I think it's great that you're giving this exposure to all these other companies. But I just recently have interacted with Augusto as a customer as well, or as a prospective customer. I just want to give you kind of a quick shout out of the amazing team that you've put together there, and the ability to turn work back, and the communication that you guys provide. And I think it's been exciting to see what you guys are up to, and to personally get involved a little bit. And hopefully we have some fun projects in the future that are gonna help to improve and increase the quality of care for people everywhere. I think that's something we both share a passion for. So thanks for having me. I'd love to do another one. But yeah, reach out to me. Andrew@thepatientcompany.com is probably the easiest way.
That's great. Thanks, Andrew. Appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Brian.
Hey, thanks for listening to the Augusto Health IT podcast. Augusto Health IT is a custom software design and development company with a focus on healthcare. If we can help you on your next project, or you just want to say hello, contact me today by calling 616-427-1914 or visit www.augustohealthit.com. Remember, you can always find this podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Google, and YouTube.